Well, good morning from Cottage Farmstead. If we haven't met before, I'm Rebecca, and it's been a long time since I've been outside in the garden working in short sleeves. But the weather here in South Carolina is starting to slowly warm up and feel a whole lot more like spring, which means there are a few crops that I need to get into the ground before our final frost date, as they prefer to grow in slightly cooler weather. So first up in the vegetable garden, I have some carrots that I need to get planted. I bought some of the Lila Lusang carrots from Baker Creek this year, as they look a lot like a variety that Johnny Seeds used to grow that was a hybrid and haven't carried in many years since, so I'm hoping these taste similar. I also bought the new Kuroda variety of carrot from Baker Creek. The reason I picked up this variety is it claims that it can power through tough soil, which hard red clay is tough soil, and it can tolerate blistering heat. So our southern summers can make carrots pretty bitter, so I'm curious to see if this is able to maintain a sweet flavor despite the fact that it gets quite hot here in the summer. And to fill in the rest of the row, I have some sample seed packets that we picked up at a farm conference last year. I have some Danvers 126 and then one that's called Little Fingers carrot. So there's just a few seeds in each packet, so I'll fill in the gaps in the row from the packets that I bought this year with these. Also in the vegetable garden, in our new zone that we are working on, I'm going to be planting our potatoes. So we didn't have a whole lot of potatoes last year as we just didn't have the space for it. But this year we are devoting a much larger section to them. And I saved some of the potatoes that we grew last year that sprouted on me, and then we also bought 2 5-pound bags of the Kennebec potatoes, which are probably the best growing russet type potato that we can grow here in South Carolina. So that's all that is going in our vegetable garden today. But I do have a lot of flowers that I want to get planted. And a lot of these like to be direct sown a couple of weeks before our final frost date. So I'm going to be putting in some poppies. So I've had this gray poppy seed for several years now. I'm not even sure how viable this is anymore. So I'm just going to plant all of this out in a patch and see what comes up. And then my mother-in-law gave me some of these black peony looking poppies that I'm going to spread around my urban flower garden. Like the gray poppies, I've had this African daisy seed for a while, and I'm going to just put it in a patch and see if any of it comes up. Borage is a neat edible flower. The plants aren't necessarily the most beautiful, but the flower tastes like a cucumber. And so it's really delicious on your spring and early summer salads. And chefs like to buy the flower from this, so I'm hoping to be able to grow some for our consumption as well as selling. And then I love bachelor buttons. I saved seeds from our garden last year and still have some from the previous year. They really preferred growing at our back porch, so instead of trying to plant some up in the urban flower terrace like I did last year, I'm going to put all of these in the back since it loved growing back there. I also saved some dill seed, as we do want a little bit of this for pickles and maybe some tzatziki sauce. I'm not entirely sure where I'm going to sprinkle this. I'll probably do it around the upper part of our garden here, as I only need a couple of heads of this for our pickle needs. And I have a few other things up here on the porch with me that need to get planted in the ground really soon. My mom was dividing some of her Asiatic lilies. These are really pretty orange color. So I am hoping to plant these up here in my urban flower terrace, as I got some from her last year when she divided them and planted them in the back. So just going to spread the love around here on the homestead. My mother also has been growing one of my dahlia tubers for me the last 2 years. It's a variety that I just picked up at Aldi one year, and it's in the gorgeous purple pink color that I really love. And it grew great at our old house. It's grown great at my mom's house the last few years. So she dug up some of the tubers for me, and I'm going to be moving it here to our new garden plot. Speaking of dahlias, my mom picked up one of these at Aldi, which is a different variety. I've never grown one that had more of a cactus looking flower, so this will be a fun tuber to add into my perennials. And my mother-in-law also picked up some of these beautiful dahlias as well that fit the same color scheme quite nicely. So I'll be planting these around our urban flower terrace as well. So lots of pretty flowers coming our way this summer. So for my dahlia tubers, I'm going to be planting them along the back edge of my flower beds. on both sides of my path here. Right here I have my black-eyed Susan, and some of the little sprouts are starting to come back up. And that is beautiful all early summer, but it does eventually start fading going into the fall. And that is when the dahlias will really take off. So I will have color behind the black-eyed Susans as they start dying off. Same thing with my oregano. It will flower at some point, which will be very pretty, but it will die back on me when it gets really hot out here. And the dahlias will be a pretty blooming addition in the back layer during the late summer and early fall. To keep track of where I am planting things, especially in this early spring season when I'm trying to stay on top of all of the weeds, I'm going to be just using a stick and some surveyor tape to mark where I have planted these so I don't accidentally try and uproot them when things start sprouting back here later this spring. So next up are my old African daisy seeds. It claims to thrive in poor soil that is well drained and drought tolerant once established. Tend to grow it in full sun. Clay is not the most well draining soil out there, but I do have a drainage ditch right here, so I'm going to plant it along the edge of that to see if that helps have this soil drain a little bit better than if I put it in one of my other beds. It's almost solid red clay. We'll see what happens. This seed is a bit old, so it may or may not come up, but it's worth a shot. This little section right here, I'm going to plant all in poppies. I'm going to do a section of the amazing gray poppies intermixed with the black peony poppies. Since I don't know if this amazing gray one is even going to germinate for me, I'm just going to intermix it in with my newer seed here and see what comes up. Per the planting instructions on the back, they like to be surface sown. So I'm going to scratch up the soil just a little bit and then put a sprinkling of the compost that I have in the bucket here on top of it, just to keep them in place as we are expecting some rain tonight. Since all my ranunculus have already popped up, I'm going to steal their little flags to put over here in this section to make it quite simple to mark where I planted. Well, lunchtime snuck up on me real quick, so I'm going to wrap up planting flowers for the day, and after lunch I will head down to the vegetable terrace to work on the carrots and potatoes. But I thought I'd give you an overview of where I planted each of the things since I was doing some more up-close shots. So the peonies are right here at my eastern entrance to my urban flower terrace, and I have marked them out here. And then along this upper terrace here, you can see I have my tags in the back where I have planted my dahlia tubers. I have 5 more dahlia tubers that I ordered a couple months ago that are on their way in the mail, so I will intermix them in this area when they arrive. Where I planted the African daisies is in that far corner over there, as well as one clump of dahlia tubers, and then I also the other day planted a few canna lilies that I marked since I forgot to do that the other day. And then over at the entrance to our vegetable terrace, I planted on each side the Asiatic lilies, so they should be a beautiful blooming entrance down into the vegetable terrace. With that, I will head inside and I'll see you again in a few minutes. So if you'll remember from our garden tours back in the fall, we were unable to get pretty much anything to grow here. I planted a whole row of sorrel and only 2 plants survived. I planted probably about 50 to 70 kale plants and I only had 4 or 5 of them survive, so didn't have a whole lot of success with a fall and winter garden. One of the reasons we think we were struggling with it is that we had a rat problem in the fall. We ended up catching 3 very big rats as well as a few mice. So hopefully we'll have less nibbling in our garden, especially since there's so much green out in the field now that our garden isn't necessarily the only place that they can get some sort of sustenance. So the first thing I'm going to get planted here in our vegetable terrace is our carrots. I do have a few pansies, some of the stragglers that did survive our fall garden, so I'm just going to plant around them. But for our family, we only need 1 row of carrots, and that is more than enough for us. So the last thing I'm going to get planted here today are my potatoes. This is in our new garden zone. We've done 4 quadrants here that are on the larger side with the intention of being able to plant corn, potatoes, and winter squash, so they have some space to sprawl. And you also, with growing corn and potatoes, you want to grow a lot more of them than you can get in a smaller row that we do have in our vegetable garden. So we're calling this our crop garden. Farmer Nathan has been bringing home upcycled microgreen dirt. So this is dirt that was used to grow microgreens already, had been dumped out in their compost pile, and he's been bringing home buckets and totes of it over the last couple of weeks to get my potato bed ready, and then we're going to be doing the same thing over here to my right for our winter squash bed, and we'll continue doing that in those other 2 zones over the next few weeks. But we have a little bit of time before we need to be thinking about planting corn and squash. Before I get my potatoes planted, I am going to mound up the dirt a little bit better into 3 rows here. We are going to do the mounding method for growing potatoes. In the past, that has been the best yielding method for us here. Last year, I just planted them in a single row, didn't do anything, and we got probably about 10 to 20 pounds per the 5 pounds that we planted, so it wasn't super impressive. The last time we did the mounding method, we grew 9 times the amount of potato that we planted, so we are going to give that a whirl again. Well, I just finished planting the potatoes, which means I am done with my planting today. It's time to go inside and wash my dirty hands and take a break this afternoon. The rain is supposed to be rolling in the next hour or 2, which will be perfect to water my carrots, potatoes, and all of the seeds and tubers that I just planted. And it's supposed to rain every other day for the rest of the week, which will be perfect for getting these parts of the garden started this year. We hope you're enjoying the beginning of gardening season, and we'll catch you next week.